their enemies. No, seriously though, this is fine. So who other than Zawan wants me to talk about Nostalrius? Because I haven't talked about that yet. And it's partially because it hasn't been brought up. It's partially because I don't really want to talk about it. But I will talk... Oh yeah, by the way, these keys are made of bamboo. Just to add to that. Also, they have something called Hosen Cuervo. So the bamboo key says, and I quote, "It's a wonder this flimsy twig can open anything." So, let's talk reality for a moment with regards to Nostalrius, okay? I don't even know if I'm saying it right, and frankly, I don't care. As I said before, a lot of players, while so the Lao lore run was actually going while Nostalrius was still up, and I got a lot of people who would pop in, probably Jaina Prodmo. A lot of people would ask me, why aren't you playing Nostalrius? To which my answer is always the exact same thing. I have no interest in it. In fact, I saved a quote. This is a derogatory quote, so forgive me. But it amused me enough that I wanted to save it. Here it is. With regards to Vanilla WoW. Yeah, I totally miss waiting 3 hours while we tried to get 40 people together for Molten Core, and the additional hour to replace the 5 people who had to leave while we were gathering the rest, and then the additional God knows how long while we attuned the 3 people who forgot to tell us they hadn't done the Onyxia event in Stormwind. Words cannot express how much I yearn for having to buy books to raise skill ranks of my demons. I pined for the day when it was more efficient to use rank 1 of a spell, regardless of the rank I actually had. I have an entire photo albums dedicated to the wonder of spending several painstaking hours a night, most of them just before a raid, filling my bags up entirely with soul shards just so I could be an effective warlock. I'll cut it off there. I didn't like vanilla that much. I liked several of the things of vanilla, but the game of vanilla, no. I never actually enjoyed the vanilla game that much. And I certainly hated going back to vanilla in BC, and I absolutely despised going back to vanilla in Wrath. Because if you remember, you know, if you wanted to level a new character in Wrath, you had to go through 1 to 60 again. You had to go through vanilla again, basically. And it was a pain. But I don't have anything universally negative. I'm not universally negative towards vanilla. As I have said more than once, many times, I personally feel that the big benefit of vanilla, the thing that everyone loved so much about it, was the community. I cannot speak for everyone because that's not how life works, but everyone I've talked to personally about it enjoyed the community aspect of vanilla, because vanilla was back when MMOs were still relatively new. It was actually the golden era of MMOs, to put it bluntly. And there was still this sense of wonder about exploring a new world and understanding new mechanics and trying to make everything work out and blah, 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 blah. And that was awesome, and that community was amazing, and that community is gone. It doesn't exist anymore, in the strictest sense of the word. And the reason why has absolutely nothing to do with WoW. It's the same reason that same community does not exist in RTSs anymore. It's the same reason that community does not exist in FPSs anymore. After a certain period of time, any given genre of game, any given type of game, gets to the point where it has become old. Where we've gotten used to it, where we know what we're doing now, and the sense of wonder and the sense of exploration and the sense of interaction has just died down. Now, that's not to say that community doesn't exist at all anymore. It's not to say that there isn't a new community in place of it. But that community is gone. And it would have been gone regardless of WoW, because MMOs have simply moved on, culturally speaking, regardless of WoW. We, the people, the players, are no longer the same players that we were 10 years ago. Again, try to keep that in mind. It has been over a decade since WoW Vanilla was out. Try to keep that in perspective. Think about how quickly and how fast our society moves forward. And then add that into the 10 years that have passed, you know? Now, that being said, I'm not saying that there aren't people who don't enjoy WoW Vanilla, the actual gameplay of WoW Vanilla. That would be incredibly stupid to actually say that there are people who don't enjoy WoW Vanilla. In fact, that would be incredibly arrogant of me, Blizzard, excuse me, to claim that nobody actually enjoys WoW Vanilla. However, in reality mode here, the simple, flat reality is that a major corporation cannot simply cater to every audience, and they have to determine how large that audience is to determine how much effort should be put into trying to satiate it. In other words, what I'm trying to say is what Blizzard really needs to do legitimately is do a feasibility study. And the harsh reality is that is unlikely to succeed. Let me explain what I mean by that. How many of you out there know someone personally, whether it's you or someone else, who, when asked a question, will not answer it honestly? Let's say you're asked something, and you're not thinking, well, what's my honest answer to this question? You're thinking, well, I know why they're asking this question, so I have to give the right answer. The right answer. I'm sure most of you know what this is like, because I'm sure most of you have gone to job interviews. You don't go into a job interview and answer their questions honestly. You go in there and answer them to the best of your ability to make sure that they hire you, right? How many of you have been asked something about something that you feel strongly about? And, you know, exactly, Raskar, you've been asked something that you feel strongly about, and you want to push the angle of their interpretation of that situation in a different way. So let's say someone polls you, in other words. You see where I'm going with this. The number of people who would say, yeah, we'd totally do a WoW vanilla server thing is much larger than the number of people who would actually do it. Do keep in mind, again, I am not saying there are not people who would pay for a WoW vanilla servers. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's difficult to get a proper feasibility study to see how much money that would take in versus how much money it would cost, because there would be a larger portion of people who would not answer that sincerely. And even amongst the people who actually would play WoW Vanilla, there's another question which is much, much harder to answer, and in fact cannot be answered because the people being asked it do not know the answer. And that question is, how long would you play WoW Vanilla? An MMO is not like a regular game where you just sell it and you walk on, or you do patches and whatnot. You need to maintain that server through subscription fees. How many people would keep playing WoW Vanilla? How long would you keep playing WoW Vanilla? And they can't answer that because they don't know. Nobody knows that. That's not how life works. You don't know how long you don't know when you're going to get bored with a game. You don't know when you're going to move on from a game, you know? You don't know if you're going to actually enjoy it as much as you thought you would. Again, do keep in mind I am not saying people would not actually enjoy it. Please do not put words into my mouth. I'm really sick of it. But in reality land, determining actual feasibility from an economic perspective of setting up a vanilla server is something that I don't think can actually happen. And that's my main point to be made here. So any attempt to actually set up some kind of a legacy server is going to be a pure gamble, and it's just going to be a decision call, and we'll see what they do with that kind of a situation. Now, I haven't talked about Nostalrius in particular yet, because honestly, in reality land, I don't really feel there's anything to talk about that. Copy wrong is, well, let's say I call copy wrong that for a good reason. I call it that because it's wrong. In reality, if you have a copyright and if you do not defend it, you legally can lose the right to that work. Because that's terrible. Because it's wrong. So, Nostalrius, the moment it got big, the moment people started spreading it all over the place, the moment people started sharing the information about it, the moment they started asking for money to keep it maintained, that is the exact moment at which Blizzard literally had to step in. They literally were required to step in legally to defend their copyright. Regardless of all other considerations, they had to shut Nostalrius down. And that sucks. But that's the way copyright law currently works. Keeping stuff under the radar is a much, much better way to maintain that kind of thing. In fact, if anybody is aware, Nostalrius was going for a decent period of time until it got big. Until it got to the point where it was getting a lot of attention. Then they had to step in. And again, that whole asking for money thing was a bit of a tipping point from what I understand. Now, some people are saying RuneScape legacy servers, and that's totally valid. I have a counter question for you, which I don't know the answer to. How much more or less complex is it to maintain an older RuneScape server versus an older WoW server? How much more or less money does it take to do that? How much more or less effort and work does it do to that? How much more or less people are required to maintain that kind of a server? And I'm not talking about GMs and whatnot. Anybody who thinks a server could just run by itself has never worked in IT. Speaking as someone who actually babysat a data center for a decent portion of his career, can tell you that servers will break down and screw up constantly, and you always have to have someone 24/7 who is constantly there trying to keep it working, right? So that's what I mean when I say maintaining the server. The people who literally keep the servers running. I'm not talking about GMs running around or anything, or patching or anything like that. The people who are actually doing that, right? How much does that take? Again, I don't know the answer to this question because I don't know RuneScape like at all. Again, I'm not saying a WoW Legacy server is not is inviable. I'm not saying it's not something that can't happen or shouldn't happen. I have actually yet to give my opinion. If you guys have been paying attention, I have just been pointing out what we know about the situation. Hope you like it, Juju's. But this is why I brought up, the very first thing I brought up was the feasibility of economic viability. How much money would a WoW Legacy server cost? How much would it cost to set up a server and their cluster who is designed around the WoW? And now, Raskor points out something that most people don't fully understand about how servers work, and I don't want to get too much into IT networking technical jargon here. Let's just put it this way. It's not like you can just set up... I mean, okay. It is more difficult than you'd think to put a server in a room with a connection over here and still have that connected to the overall network of the rest of the server farm and the server cluster that's working than you'd think. And if you want to just put it in with the rest of the server cluster, the fact that you have basically one version of the software, the legacy server, and then the rest of the versions which are up to date, that's also going to cause conflicts and issues. Again, not saying it's impossible, but this is a hurdle that would have to be overcome, which is more time and money spent into it. Now, I'll go ahead and give my opinion now. I am hopeful that they do actually implement this. I am hopeful that they actually implement some kind of a legacy server. I will never play on it. I don't give a damn about WoW Vanilla, and I already have my community of my friends. However, I very much hope that they add that option for people who do genuinely want it, or for people who do genuinely enjoy it, or for people who want that kind of experience, or for people who never got that kind of experience. I would love for them to add that option in. There is one other niggle here with regards to that, though, and that is... it is not outside of feasibility to state that people might not be satisfied with just a vanilla server. In other words, that people might... let's say they put out a vanilla server. Let me just give you a hypothetical. They put out a vanilla server, and then people play it and blah, 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 and then people start demanding a BC server, separate from the vanilla server, and then people start demanding a Wrath server, and it would probably stop there. But you kind of get it, if you understand. It's not quite a slippery slope situation, but if I was in charge of the Blizzard management side of these things, I would look at this saying, we cannot go forward with a vanilla server unless we are prepared to go forward with a vanilla, a BC, and a Wrath server, which is a different feasibility study, is a different examination of cost and time and expense and all that stuff. And again, I would love it if they did that. I really would. But you have to be prepared for the future, not just the now, when you implement something that is going to be that iterative. Now, one last thought about the Nostalrius thing. Blizzard's PR team needs some work. They have not been responding to the situation how they should have. Some of them have been... I've seen a couple of blue posts that have been reasoned and well-meaning and well-adjusted and have actually responded to concerns and comments well. And then I've seen everyone else. The infamous, you think you know it, but you don't know what you know comment, or however the hell they said that, which is just stupid. Never tell a customer what they want. Ever. Even if you actually believe you're correct, you never actually say that to your face. That is terrible PR. That is terrible marketing. Don't ever do that. So, now, I will say this in Blizzard's favor, and I'm curious what will come of this. For those of you not aware, the chief team of the Nostalrius team was invited to Irvine, California, to talk. To my knowledge, we don't know anything after that. We don't know what they're talking about exactly. We don't know what they've decided. We don't know what came of that discussion. But the fact that they're willing to reach out and say, why don't you come talk to us about this? I think that's a good sign. That is very, very unlikely to be some kind of legal issue, because that's not how that's done. You don't invite someone to your corporate headquarters to talk about legality issues. You invite someone to your corporate headquarters to talk about possibilities for the future. You know? Yeah, you think you want it, but you don't. That's the quote. Now, so Raskor points out something that is actually much harder to do than it should be. Again, I hate to point this out, but copyright law is wrong. There's a reason I keep calling it copy raw. Wrong. Hi, Shiryu. Hi, Darkrai. Giving out licenses for servers is a legal mess. And I don't want to get too much into this. I have a little bit of experience with this, and I've looked into this, and I know someone who knows law a lot better than I do, who has looked into this extensively. Handing out official legal license servers so that other people can start official legal WoW servers it's a mess, legally speaking. Especially when you get into the fact that most of these servers would probably be worldwide, and therefore not solely constrained to a single set of legal rules. So again, this isn't a thing that's impossible, but it would be a gnarl. It would be a gnarl to untangle in order to make it actually work. And yeah, and part of the problem there is the fact that Blizzard is not set up for that. So Raskor points out that Microsoft does that, and Maskor is absolutely true. Photoshop, Apple's does that. Corel does that. You know, a lot of programs do that. You buy a license rather than an actual server or whatever. The problem is those people are already set up for that, if that makes sense. They already have the foundation for that. They already have the infrastructure for that. They already have the legality written. They already have the contracts written. They already have all of that settled. Blizzard has none of that done, which is exactly what I was just saying. Blizzard has none of that prep work done in order to be able to sell out licenses like that. That's the issue. It is an issue that is solvable, but it is an issue. Make sense? And they could solve it. That may be where they're going with this. They may decide to go ahead and push through and just be like, you know what? We're going to go ahead and start selling vanilla licenses, BC licenses, Wrath licenses, Kata licenses, you know, however far they feel like going with it. And then selling those licenses out for people to set up their own private servers legally and legitimately. That may be the route they're going with this. They may be trying this whole Pristine servers thing. Let me go ahead and just give my opinion on that. I think Pristine servers are stupid. I think that's dumb. I think it's unnecessary. The only reason... I mean, you realize that Pristine servers are just making mandatory what you can do optionally, right? If I could use a parallel really quick. If I'm playing XCOM, and XCOM 2, let's say XCOM 2, and I want permadeath. I can do that. I mostly did that when I played through XCOM 2, with a few critical exceptions. If I do Iron Man mode, all that does is enforce the same thing that I was doing optionally. It doesn't actually add anything to the game. All it does is take away the agency from me, the player. All it does is force it upon me, and if something went wrong, which, if you'll remember, it did. We had a game-breaking bug there. If I had hardcore mode on, or Iron Man mode on, and hit that bug, that would have been the end of that playthrough. And I would have had no way around that because I had that option flicked on, because it made it mandatory. So I look at Pristine servers and I'm just like, why? I don't understand the purpose of that. That is, of course, just my perspective and my opinion. That being said, implementing a Pristine server would be roughly infinitely easier to do than implementing an actual legacy server or implementing the license thing I mentioned. So from an implementation perspective, the cost of doing a Pristine server is basically non-existent. That would be a few weeks of setup and testing and then boom, done. As opposed to everything else we've mentioned, which will probably be months, in the months range or years range, or year I'd say range. So they might do that in it while they're doing the other stuff, if you understand. They might push out Pristine servers and to test the water because it's so easy and cheap to implement, while they're working on the more long-term, costly, time-consuming other solutions to this problem. Does anybody have any questions? I think I covered everything about Nostalrius. I need to chop this section off to toss onto YouTube because I know people are just going to want to hear my thoughts on this. I'm not giving my opinion on that one, Zawon. You spelled my name wrong too. I'm going to give one other opinion here, and this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but I've always been honest with you guys, so here it goes. I have never heard personally from anyone who actually enjoys WoW Vanilla and has been able to tell me why without either A, solely focusing on the community aspects of it, or B, not giving me any real reasoning why they liked WoW Vanilla. Does that make sense? I'm probably saying this wrong. I have never heard from anyone who, in my opinion, has given any actual legitimate, well-reasoned thought behind why they liked WoW Vanilla. I've never encountered that before. That does not involve the community. Everyone I've talked to who enjoyed WoW, who says they would like to go back to WoW Vanilla, the older days, and I have several friends who are like that personally, have all said it's all about the community. Every other comment I've heard has just been a shrieking chorus, basically. I'm sorry, that's derogatory. I don't want to put it that way. I have heard the majority of the rest of the people have been a shrieking chorus. Or some people who have just said, well, I liked it better. Or, well, you know, it's worse now. Or garrisons, because that's just the current buzzword to say to explain why you think WoW is bad right now. As I pointed out yesterday, every expansion has had one buzzword that people have focused in on and said this is why WoW is terrible. And it just happens to be garrisons right now. Give it about a year and it'll be something else. In Legion. Hi, Myron. I know, right, Draconis. Now, Raskor makes up a good point. Yes, that's right, Diesel. Raskor does bring up a good point. Designing your own strategy for the bosses in WoW Vanilla, and to an extent in BC as well, was actually pretty fun. I actually had a lot of fun doing that, and I freely admit that. I will also... in my blunt opinion, the raids are better designed than they've ever been. I talked about this. I've talked about this extensively. We'll talk about this in Warlords and why it's actually a problem. But that because if you look at the vanilla raids, they're not actually that well designed, except for a few key bosses. So I will freely admit, though, and I will totally give Raskor this point, it was fun trying to come up with your own strategies for a boss. That being said, the prep and the aggravation of vanilla raids is something I remember far more keenly, personally. No, I have not, Eru, nor will I this year. Hey, Dwalin. What's up? We're talking about raid design right now. Well, they are more streamlined. I'll actually agree with that. But I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. And this is just my opinion. I'm going to stress this is just my opinion. I didn't enjoy running Zul'Gurub before we did a major raid because I needed to make sure I had my stuff ready. I didn't enjoy running around gathering herbs to get potions and elixirs. I didn't enjoy constantly gathering all the soul stones on my warlock. I didn't enjoy the ridiculous amount of prep work and, in my opinion, grind that went into prepping for a raid and then standing around waiting for 40 people to show up and then having to stand around while people left and then having people replaced. There were good aspects to WoW Vanilla raids, do not mistake me, but what I tend to remember most is what was the bulk of the time that I had. And maybe that was just because I had a bad guild or I had bad raid groups or whatever, but so much of my time in vanilla rounds was busy work. When I got to the meat of the vanilla raids, I had fun. It was great. I loved pushing through Blackwing Lair, for example. I loved crawling inch by inch through Noxoramus. I never even finished Noxoramus in vanilla. We just got to a certain point. We got up to the Four Horsemen, I've told you this. You know, I loved crawling through, Black Temple is another good example, because this was this way in BC as well. But all that busy work leading up to it and all the prep work and just, I did not enjoy that at all. And maybe that makes me an entitled, selfish, worthless, terrible person. I don't know. But that is just my opinion on the matter. Now, hang on. Some people said something. I want to respond to people. So let me scroll up a little bit. So Zawun mentioned that WoW felt more like an RPG in vanilla, which I find interesting because I have the exact opposite opinion. But let me explain what I mean. Maybe we're having a terminology issue. In my opinion, WoW vanilla and, to a lesser extent, BC and Wrath was more of an MMO. Whereas nowadays, it feels more like an RPG, a single-player RPG. That's been my perspective on it. Then it was way more of an MMO, way more of the multiplayer, massive multiplayer online interaction. And nowadays it's much more about the single-player, story-focused, driven RPG. That's my take on it, of course. Yeah. Now I gotta scroll up again. Yeah, Legion looks like they're doing a lot more work on everything else. It's such a shame, but we'll talk about that when we get to Warlords. I also agree with what Mr. Churls said. The lack of tiering in Warlords was kind of sad, and there is reasons for that. Whether those are acceptable or not is going to be up to the individual to decide. I personally think what they did with Warlords was a little criminal, and I like Warlords, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Hi, Deutsch. What is OSRS, Zawun? Ruthax, I've actually talked about the concept you're talking about there, Ruthax, many times. It is the difference between... I've talked about this before. I've said many times there's no good answer between individuality and bring the player, not the class kind of a thing, right? In other words, over here on the left, we have BC, which is old school rules. Thank you. Old school. Yeah, no kidding, Rascor. In vanilla, and most especially in BC, BC was the strongest about this. In BC, every tank class had their own thing that they were good at. Every heal class had their thing they were good at. You had to have a Shadow Priest because they were good at this. You know, you had to have an Elemental Shaman because they were good at this. The variance between the classes was big. Each class really was distinctly different, not just in feel of gameplay, but in what they could actually do, mechanically speaking. Nowadays, we're far more over here, where things are a lot more homogenized. Supposedly, this will change in Legion, because they're really emphasizing that each spec is a class in Legion. We'll see how that works in action. But as of right now, we're way over here, where most, a tank is a tank, a healer is a healer, and a DPS is a DPS. And the only real... I'm sorry, that's not true. The ranged DPS is a ranged DPS, and a melee DPS is melee. Those are the four classes right now in WoW. And there are arguments for both sides of this argument. And I've given these before, and I don't want to rehash that too much right now. So, and there are benefits and detriments to both sides of this. On this side, you feel more unique. Some bosses function differently between, what, like Raskor points out, you could actually have bosses that have a mechanic that class or that spec, is tailored for. You actually you'd feel like you're really contributing to a group because you are specifically adding this to the group, that kind of a thing, right? On the negative side of that, though, again, staying over here, in some cases, you had to have a certain boss to come and thing. You had to bring someone for this kind of a setup. You needed this kind of thing. It took some of the agency away from the players because you had to have a Shadow Priest. You had to have someone who had Bloodlust. You had to have a Shadow... to use the Noxramas example, when you're fighting Resuvius, you needed a priest. In fact, you needed multiple priests. You had no choice on the matter. So if you've got a priest in your guild who isn't that good, or you don't like him, or whatever, it doesn't matter. You have to bring him to progress through that boss. It got to the point where some guilds got so finicky about who they would accept as new raiders that they would say, we are recruiting a Shadow Priest and nothing else. And they were so desperate for a Shadow Priest that they'd take anybody who would invite, that kind of thing. So there are pluses and negatives to that. Of course, on the homogenization side, the positive is you can bring whoever. If you're a tank, you come. If you're a healer, you come. If you're a DPS, you come. You can bring your friends or people who are actually good, as opposed to someone who happens to have the class and spec you want. The downsides are obvious, though, of the homogenized adjacent side. We're homogenized. You feel like a tank. You feel like a DPS. You don't feel like a fire mage. You don't feel like you're bringing anything specific to the raid, even though you actually are. You're not really bringing anything that the other 12 people aren't also bringing, right? So your contribution is just that you're part of the mass rather than you are one of the people who actually matters. And of course, again, you feel the same pretty much regardless of what you're playing across the 4 different archetypes. Now, what Raskar points out is another interesting thing. That was the other downside of over here. How many of you, and I am in this as well, how many of you were forced to go reroll because the guild needed something else? Because they needed this other spec, this other class. And so you had to go reroll to make it. That happened to me more than once. Because we needed a blah. But of course, again, to flip this over to the negatives on the homogenization side, what's the point of rerolling on the homogenization side? What's the point of rerolling a mage when you already have a warlock? What's the difference, right? I am very hopeful, tentatively, hesitantly hopeful that Legion will help fix the homogenization side of things. We'll see. I do believe we are too homogenized right now. And as I've said, I don't think either of these sides are right or wrong. I think both of them have positives and both of them have negatives. But I do think that a little more in the middle is probably the better option, and I am hopeful Legion will push us closer to that and really help make each spec actually function and feel differently than the other specs. We'll see. And yeah, Mr. Churls does bring up a good point. Talent trees back in the day had a lot more options, a lot more freedom in what you could do with them, for good and for bad. In some cases that worked out so that you could just try silly random builds, and in some cases it meant that you would have talents which were useless or talents which you would basically eat in order to get what you actually wanted. I feel that's again a positive and a negative situation. Just my take on that. Oh, I've passed 100 subs. Have I now? What time is it? Why don't we get to a certain point of the story? So I'm done talking about Nostalrius. I'm just gonna make a note here for myself. 247. So I can chop this off and toss it up to YouTube separately. Of course, this will be going up live on the new channel because this is stream related, not the old channel. I didn't see a whisper, no, Deutsch. Wait, hang on, let me scroll up. Oh, never mind, it's right there. I'm just an idiot, Deutsch, sorry. I just missed it. Where was I? Reading! Ha! You're brave. An admirable trait. You have freed my brothers? Good. We are in your debt. Tank is the one. Off tank. As in the good tank. The skulls are precious to my tribe. How many have you collected? It is good to see you are so resourceful. It is a trait admired by my people. The fine specimens you have brought me will produce powerful magic. I hope you are capable of this next task, for our lives depend on it. There is only one key that will unlock our chains, and unfortunately, the key hangs around the neck of the Hosen's pet tiger, Kung Din. They keep the tiger in the great pit to the north. The only way to retrieve the key will be to kill the beast. Many reasons, Darkrai. But most importantly because I am tired of the complaining, so I've decided to finally 100% segregate the two aspects of my show. There are less derogatory reasons for that, too. I mean, you know, for example, people who only care about my YouTube side of things will never have to see, you know, an update every day for a month about stream uploads that are going live. And similarly, people who are only actually interested in the stream side of things, I'm not sure if those people exist, but whatever, who are just looking for a replay of a certain stream can go find that quickly and easily. That kind of thing. Do I think WoW has turned into instant gratification? I have a bit of a complicated answer to that question. I suppose for me, it depends on what you define as instant gratification. I know that sounds weird, but let me explain what I mean by that. What do you mean, Zawon? Elaborate if you don't mind. Yeah, kinda, sure you. So, yeah. How do I put this? For me, I understand putting effort into something to enjoy it more. Absolutely. In fact, I tend to prefer that. I'm the guy who likes, video games that are 60-plus hours long. I'm the guy who doesn't really like most mobile games because I feel that most, again, adding that asterisk, most mobile games are much more instant gratification. I don't have a better way to put that. And having to basically just being able to push a button or spend mana or something is irritating. As I mentioned before, I am actually irritated by the fact that you can buy a level 100. I am irritated by the fact you can buy gold. I fully defend it because of the security side of things and because that stuff exists regardless of legitimate nature. I talked about this yesterday. I'm not going to rehash that point. I like how we're back in the same spot talking again. But I don't think... See, for me, having to put work in is a little different than having to put time in. If I have to go grind, which by my own definition, grind is any repetitive, time-consuming task that is not enjoyed. In other words, padding. If I have to endure eating a pound of gravel in order to get a Twinkie, that does not make it so that I enjoy the Twinkie. I would rather just get to the Twinkie. If, by contrast, to make a different analogy, if I have to go into the kitchen and put together a decent meal and spend some time prepping and cooking and slicing and gutting and then sit down and eat my decent meal, that will be more enjoyable for me because none of that was grind. I know this analogy sounds weird, but I hope I'm explaining it well. Because I put work into it. I put effort into it. I didn't put just padding into it. If I had to go into the kitchen and just stare at a timer, or if I had to, press a button 100 times in order to make my dinner happen, that would not be worth it for me. So, on the one hand, I feel that WoW has gotten rid of a lot of the fat, a lot of the padding, a lot of the grind, and I think that's a good thing. On the other hand, I do think they have streamlined things a wee bit too much in some cases, but at the same time, I'm actually okay with that because the harder stuff is not streamlined at all. Let me explain what I mean a little bit by that. If you just want to go through and enjoy... WoW has basically added in a casual difficulty mode, and I am okay with that because of the same reason I'm okay with casual difficulty in StarCraft 2. Because there are some people who aren't good at RTSs, who don't like RTSs, but who still want to play it because they enjoy the story. Or because they want to hang out with their friends in an MMO's case. And there are people who just kind of want to go through WoW and enjoy the story and hang out with their friends. And so the casual difficulty, which is the LFR mode, the LFG modes, and just questing up by yourself or with your friends, I'm okay with that. I will say, but by contrast to that, if you want to do something a little meatier, if you want to do something a little more difficult, that difficulty is still there. One of the things I absolutely hate is people I haven't seen any of my viewers do this, but people who say that WoW is easier than it's ever been. And I disagree with that vehemently. Go and try to do any of the Mythic difficulties right now at endgame. Go and try to do the Mythic dungeon modes. Go and try to do anything that's actually hard in WoW. The hard stuff that is in WoW is in many cases harder than it's ever been, with some exceptions. And it's mostly genuine difficulty too, not just padding, not just grind. Another good example of this is the challenge mode dungeons. That's difficult. It's meat, and if you want that kind of a hardcore mode, if you want that kind of I want to be challenged, if you have the benefit of actually having people who can actually do that stuff with you, awesome. I would actually have liked to have done some of that harder stuff in Warlords. I didn't really get to do much of it because I didn't have a guild at my back, but everything I got to do was fun. So I guess I know this is kind of a long answer, but this is why I say I don't really think WoW has become more instant gratification, because while there is that casual friendly thing, as Raskar points out, there's also the meatier stuff for you to actually try, which still requires work and effort, and not just grind. Yes, Octavian. Well, nobody in chat, none of my viewers have done that, but the people are complaining about that to this day. I saw a forum post just this morning about that. I'm not going to respond to that, Preacher, other than the fact that I totally agree with you. Anyways, now the one Joker, I'm actually going to defend you on this, even though I totally disagree with you. And I do. I want to make this clear. I cannot disagree with the one Joker more. I cannot stand fat in my meat. I can't. I prefer as lean of meat as possible. This is true in real life. I mean, actual meat when you're eating. I don't like fat, and I can't stand gristle as well, but that's a different thing. But that's by preference. When it comes to a game or a show or a movie, I prefer content, meat, not fat. I don't want padding. I don't want grind. I don't want any of that crap. That is just my preference. But to defend Zawund, there are people who prefer fatty meat. There are people who want to go grind. There are people who want... I shouldn't even call it grind at this point, because grind, by my own definition, is something that isn't enjoyed. So it wouldn't be grinding for them. They want to go do the prep work for raids. They want to go mulch their way through levels. They want to slog 1 through 60. They want to die constantly and constantly have to start over. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that if there was some ideal way we could have our cake and eat it too, where we can have both things, I think that would be great. And I think the possibility of the server license thing we talked about earlier is a good way to have both things, so that the audience who wants to mulch their face into the grindstone and the audience who wants to skip that, both of those are available. So, and I mention this because this is not the first time I've heard this. Javan also has this same thought. So Zawund and Javan both think that if you go and hit a button 100 times, the meal will be more enjoyable. And I'm not saying this to be sarcastic or sardonic, there are people who think hitting a button 100 times makes the meal that comes out more enjoyable. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's actually cool that we have that varied and different of opinion. I love just plain out looking at Zawund Joker and saying, I totally disagree with you. I like that. So for the people who want to hit a button 100 times, for the people who want grind, for the people who want fat in their meat, I will absolutely acquiesce that WoW does not have anywhere near as much of that as it used to. The amount of it has is minute and minuscule compared to what used to be in this game. I need a bot. Now, I've talked about the LFR problem before. I don't want to rehash all of that. I'd just like to re-emphasize once again my preference for the scaling mode rather than the LFR mode. The biggest problem with LFR, in my personal opinion, can be described by LFR Archimond. How many of you out there have done LFR Archimond? Now, how many of you out there who have defeated LFR Archimond did it your first shot? I'm not raising my hand on that second one, because I have never one-shot LFR Archimond. The reason why is because even though LFR dumbs down the damage, and dumbs down their health, and pulls their stats down, and of course tries to make mechanics a little bit simpler or easier to deal with, any boss that simply has any kind of proper coordination check, or paying attention check, or whatever, is basically artificially harder in LFR than any other boss in LFR, because it's LFR. People are not coordinating. People are not paying attention. People are not anything. That is the critical difference between LFR and normal. In normal, all 10 or 25 or whatever of you are working together and coordinating on this one goal. In LFR, you're in a group with total strangers who probably aren't even talking to you, and vice versa. Unless it's to say how incredibly stupid and lame you are. That's obviously a thing. Now, there's been a few other bosses like this in the past. Pandaria had a few as well that were pretty... Like, you've been down and then you just run into this wall of this one boss that people didn't know how to coordinate on. And I don't think LFR is the ideal solution. I don't think, yeah, exactly, I don't think LFR is the ideal solution. I do agree with the philosophy behind LFR. Let me make that clear. I do agree with the philosophy of trying to ensure that all the players have the chance of experiencing the content. I absolutely, firmly agree with that. And again, the argument that's always made is 40-man Noxramas. How many people, what percentage of the players of WoW have completed 40-man Noxramas? Period. In any time in vanilla and BC. It's a small percent. It's a very small percent. And that's a huge amount of time and work and effort that was done on an amazing raid, a brilliantly designed raid that a lot of people just never get to experience. But I don't think LFR is the ideal answer to this. I don't think LFR is the correct solution to this. That's just my opinion on it. I think. Oh yeah, let me go ahead and give my other super controversial, everyone hates me for this opinion. I think 40-mans were a huge mistake. I absolutely was so happy when they went down from 40-mans to 25. So with regards to what was the one said, I swear I haven't been ignoring you. I've just been talking about everything else. I get what you're saying on that, Zawan, and I guess I could understand the feeling of that, of wanting the oomph of a crit, as you yourself put it, of the fact that any given, casting you do just makes it go like that, as opposed to, this. Oh yeah, let me go ahead and give my other super controversial, everyone hates me for this opinion. I think 40-mans were a huge mistake. I absolutely was so happy when they went down from 40-mans to 25. I really, really, really hated trying to coordinate 40 people. It sucked. If I had to choose between being one of the 3% or my friends actually getting to see Noxramas, I'd pick my friends getting to see Noxramas in a millisecond. I mean, of course it felt nice being there. You know what else felt nice? This thing right here. You see this? I was the main tank for this. I'm sure some of you... I don't have to explain this for some of you. You people know exactly what this is. But if I had to choose between having the exclusivity of this and being able to help my friends get it, again, I would choose the latter in a heartbeat. It is simply my nature to lean towards options, and when you lock out content, when you have exclusivity, that is pretty much the exact opposite of options when it comes to game design. So, while it did feel good, and I'll agree with that, I would never choose that over the alternative, if that makes sense. I will agree that the 40-mans felt more MMO-y. However, again, speaking from the reality perspective of getting 40 people together, losing people, having to get new people, making sure all 40 people were properly attuned, making sure all 40 people had all of the grind they needed to get necessary to go in there, being only able to raid for about an hour of actual raiding with 3 hours of prep time and 1 hour of screw-up time. I think the logistics of having a smaller raid appealed to me more rather than having, 40 people. If there was some way to just... And then, okay, we're ready to go, a 40-man, I might be more okay with that. I say might because they have actually added that. They added the LFR Molten Core. Remember that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm uncertain about that. I have no actual data to form a better opinion on that. Well, see, here's the thing, Chef Laurent. I'm probably in the minority on this, but let me give you an example. Right now, the way it works is if I do this, I don't have a cool mount, I have a status symbol, right? I can show right there that I did... Well, see, here's the thing, Chef Laurent. I'm probably in the minority on this, but let me give you an example. Right now, the way it works is if I do this, I don't have a cool mount, I have a status symbol, right? I can show right there that I did 4 chest run back in the day. That I accomplished it and I did it. I was maintaining for it. It was fun. It was awesome. And I loved that raid, let's make that clear. But that is more of a status symbol than a cool mount. Now let us assume for a moment that that was true for all of the mounts, that it all had the exclusive thing. I never would have gotten... where is it? This mount, if that was true. Now, this is the 25-man version, specifically. I would have gotten the 10-man version, but not the 25. And if they got rid of this, like they did with, for example, the old Wrath Noxeramus mount, which I don't have, I would have never been able to get it. Now, is it because that I am not good enough to do that? No, because I got this mount. And I would still have this mount, regardless. It is not a matter of whether or not I was capable. It is not a matter of whether or not I was committed enough. It was only a matter of whether or not I had 24 other people to go with me. Does that make sense? So, for me, I would rather leave the I would rather do something else for exclusivity rather than locking people out of ever being able to get Mount A, for example, because they didn't have 24 other people. Because they didn't have 9 other people. Because they just literally could not get it. It was functionally impossible to actually get together a group and go do the raid. That is my opinion. I know it's hated by a lot of people. Yes, you can go back and get that dragon now. This one right here. You can still go back and get this dragon as of this moment in time. But what I personally think is we need another thing. We need some other kind of thing, probably cosmetic, that is status symbol. You know what I mean? To explain what I mean by that, let's say you could go back to the raid version of Zul'Gurub right now and get the Amani Bear. So the Amani Bear is no longer the exclusive, but add something new that is the new exclusive. Add something so that I did this when it was hard. Add something to show I accomplished this back in the day, and I managed this so that people can have that feeling of, of pride and an accomplishment and satisfaction in the fact that they did that. Now, I'm not 100% sure what could be done for that, but this is my honest opinion. I think we need to add, like, a new thing. Maybe titles? I don't know. Some kind of other thing onto the side. Titles might actually not be a bad idea. That could show I did this back when it was hard. I did this, and I accomplished this, and that would be awesome. Like, so Mira Madera mentioned the Immortal. Hang on. That's actually a good one to point out, because some of you have probably seen me wandering around, and I've never changed this title ever since I've got it. Hang on. On the character I actually earned the title on. If you can read this, right there my title is The Undying. You can't get that anymore. It's gone. I earned that title, damn it. And I was very proud and very, very satisfied in earning that title. There's a reason Frozen, my warrior, has never removed that title from her bar. She has always been The Undying, because damn it, that was awesome. So titles might be a way to do that. But as Chef Laurent points out, we already have so many titles, Where's the other one? There's an Ulduar one I have, too, that I'm very proud of. I can never remember which it is. As you can see, there's quite a few titles. Is that it? Champion of Ulduar? There's one that's the Undying equivalent of Ulduar, and I have that, and I think it's Champion of Ulduar. I'm not sure. I'm also very proud of that one. Because, we earned that. I've told you that story the night of, right? And I have one of the... There it is, Champion of the Naru, which I also have. So maybe titles is a better way to do that. I hope I'm trying to make my point clear. My point is, for me, mounts is part of the suit, if you know what I mean. So in other words, the same way in this, mount is part of my transmog, is the way I tend to think of that. I tend to think of looking at this as part of my outfit. And I don't want to restrict people from being able to get that mount just so I can have the exclusivity of saying I earned it when it was hard. I would rather have something like a title or some kind of medal or some kind of other thing that shows I did that back in the day, as opposed to restricting other people for that. Does this make sense? I really don't know if I'm making my point properly. I feel like I'm explaining in circles here. I mean, I'm a hell of a mount collector, too. Actually, I'm saying that wrong. I have a lot of enjoyment from mount collecting, but I only have, like, what is that, like, 2/3 of the mounts? I will agree with you on that, Zoan, but I think the focus is in the wrong direction. I think the problem is, back in vanilla, epics actually had higher item budget. They don't anymore, and I think that's the issue. As I've pointed out, so... the item budget is how an item determines how good it is, okay? See this? I don't know the actual number of what the item budget is here, but any given piece of gear has an item level. You see it right there. It's 264. That means it has X currency item budget to distribute amongst its stats. So that 14 strength, 32 stamina, 14 crit, 6 haste, 2 sockets, and 47 armor. All of that eats up. All of that is budgeted out amongst that 264. Okay, that's how items work in WoW. Item level determines item budget. The problem is, back in vanilla, a white item, well, a green item that was 264, obviously it wasn't 264 in vanilla, but hear me out. A green item that was 264 had less of an item budget than a blue item that and a purple item, and, well, that was the end of it. So a purple item of the same item level as a blue item actually was better. Now, I actually like that. I actually fully agree with you on this, Zoan. I think if they're going to keep the item, if they're going to keep the tiers of colors, they should keep doing that increased item budget concept. I get why they didn't. It added more. It adds more work, basically. It takes up more time to do that kind of a thing. Ugh, but I still like it. I still like the fact that if you see a blue of item level 200 and a purple of an item level 200, that purple is probably going to be better because it's a purple. Right now, that's not true. Right now, at the current gear level of endgame, a blue or a green or a purple is just a color. It literally means nothing. It is completely cosmetic and has no change on anything. So I do actually agree with Zoan on that one. Oh god, I agree with Zoan on something, guys. But yes, Preacher, you can absolutely get the mount that I just showed off. There's a bunch of mounts you can still get. Not all of the ones I have. Some of these are... A couple of these you can't get anymore. Only a couple, though. You could get this mount. You won't, but you could. Hi, Norlix. I could see that argument, Ventures. I would disagree with it personally, but I could see that argument, absolutely. So Chef Laurent brings up another excellent point. I actually have the title of the Black Harvest on my Warlock. I actually streamed that when I got it. I was very, very happy to get that, because I was actually under-geared for that fight. So I wasn't just fighting him at level, I was fighting him under level, effectively. So, I totally get that feeling of, oh, it'd be awesome to do that. And I agree with what Chef Laurent says. If they had an option to say, I want to be level 90 with equivalent 90 raid gear item level, and they could do that. That tech already exists. That tech already exists in the game to scale us down. That tech has existed since Pandaria. They already know how to do it. So why not make it so that, for example, let's go back to our original example. Boom, the Yamani Warbear. What if there was tech in the game saying, if you flip a switch, you're level 70, and you can go do Zul'Gurub with 10 people and actually do the bear mount run for real and actually get to experience it. Now, I will make this point that I think that should be optional. In other words, let me explain what I mean by this a little bit. We'll use the Black Harvest as the example here. I think that you should be able to go get Green Flame regardless. You should be able to go do it at 100 and nuke it and get it because it looks cool. But I think you should only be able to get the title or whatever cosmetic other thing that I talked about earlier if you do it the hard way, either if you did it at the time or if you turn on the hard mode and your switch is on, so you're now down to level 90 and you're doing it as if it actually was. So you get to experience. So we get all three things here. People get the cosmetic option, even if they're not good or don't have a raid or whatever, so people can still get the cosmetic stuff. I like that. People can still experience it when it was actually hard and challenging and fun as an option. So I like that. And there's some kind of reward, some kind of medal showing that you did it the hard way. I think that would be a good solution to satisfy all three categories with regards to this topic. Just my take on it. And it would not be that hard to implement everything I am suggesting right now. Having an optional switch, having a reward that you only get, like the title thing or whatever, that you only get if you're doing it the hard mode, or if you did it back in the day, and making it so you can just get the drop, regardless of how you do it. That is true, Zawan, and I have no answer for that. Shrug. I have no answer for that. Iterative game design. So that's... Oh, well, Venters, that would slide neatly into my thing I just mentioned. For example, to use the exact example, wouldn't it be nice if someone could go... I would love to go back and do the Warlock quest. I never got to do it back in the day. I did the Paladin quest. Now, in the interest of fairness, the Paladin quest was about half boring, dull grind, but the other half was awesome. I would love the option to go back and do the Warlock quest I never got to do. And I would love to be able to do it at the time, with that difficulty, with the switch on, so I'm level 60. I'm down with that. So, again, that slots into this compromise I just came up with. Guild Wars 2 has a similar system to that, Dakota. A little badly implemented, in my opinion, at least for overworld questing, but they do have a similar system implemented. WoW, the system that already exists in WoW, will not just lower your level. It will lower your item level. It will lower your overall stats. It will bring you down so as if you had gear that was also level 90. Oh, is that true, Mikaros? That sucks. See, I've done the final fight on Warlock. I helped a friend do it. And that was an awesome fight. But, yeah. And yeah, so that's another thing. To make this point clear, I really disagree with absolutely just removing mounts from the game. Like this one you're staring at right here. This mount is non-obtainable. It's not just you get it easier or you can go back. No, this mount is gone. You cannot get this mount ever again. It's gone. Unless they ever change that. Ahem. You can get this mount, but you cannot get this mount. There are some mounts that I will never get because I didn't get to get them back in the day. Like, I like that idea, Zoan. I think that's a good way to do it. There's, hang on, it would be in the don't have. Now, I don't even like this mount, appearance-wise. What is it? Is it the Plagued one? But I will never get this mount. That choice has been taken from me. What's it called? Because it's been removed. It's at the point where I cannot go back and get it. What is it called? It's the one from Noxuramas. The one from 10 and 25 Noxuramas that was removed. It's the only one they removed from Wrath. They stopped doing that immediately afterwards. Because they were thinking about removing the Ulduar Proto-Drakes, if you remember, and they decided against that. Anyone remember that? Wow, it's not even on my list. Do I have it filtered out? Weird. I literally don't even see it on my list. Well, whatever. This mount can go suck it. I hate the Time Lost Proto-Drake. In fact, that's odd, because the Black Tank isn't on here either. That's weird. It's not even on my list. Whatever. I was going to show it to you, but there is a mount that I can't get anymore, and is gone forever. Even though, by the time of about Ulduar, I want to say... no, it was closer to when Citadel came out. So me and my friends actually wanted to go back and try and do some of the stuff, and we couldn't, because they'd removed it. So, like, for example, the achievement for Noxuramas, we did just for the sake of achievement's sake, just for the fun of being able to do it, and for no other reason. Oh yeah, these are the only achievements we don't have in Wrath, and may never have. This achievement sucks. For those of you who can't read that, this is the defeat 20 scrap bots within 12 seconds using bomb bots. I think they did, yes, Venters. But my raiding experience kind of broke apart right after Ulduar and then came back together during the end of TOC. So, oh yeah, that's another thing. I do not like this. I mean, the professional in me, the businessman in me defends this because it's cosmetic money, sure. But I feel they have crossed over a line when it comes to these. These are a lot of these have unique, if not model. They don't have unique meshes, but they have unique models. This guy actually has a completely unique mesh. To my knowledge, no other mount in the entire game has his exact model and his skeleton, basically. And this guy looks absolutely amazing. In fact, I actually bought him, as you can see, for my hunter because it was just such a cool mount. And that's kind of why I don't like this. Because some of these mounts are really appropriate for certain things, or really look cool for certain things, and you can't get something even equivalent otherwise. For example, this guy. Now, for those of you not aware, the Fey Dragon is a mount that the Draenei actually use in Draenor. This guy is a mount that the Iron Horde uses in Draenor. This guy is a mount that the Laughing Skull Orcs use in Draenor. However, these mounts, or even equivalents to these mounts, cannot be obtained by working with those reps or working with those people. You buy them in the store. Now, there is another Rylak you can get, so that's a little better, but that was added in. To my knowledge, there's no other Reaver you can get. There's just this one. So, like I said, I'm of two minds on this. On the one hand, I don't like the fact that to get certain cool mounts, you have to drop money on it. But on the other hand, it is a cosmetic thing, and if you're going to have a money store in your game, God's sakes, at least make it cosmetic. Do not let me buy gear. Do not let me buy levels, you know? So. And of course, we actually, so there's actually one other thing. These are 25 bucks. Now, occasionally they go on sale. Every single one of these I purchased on sale. And if in the future, if this one or this one or this one ever goes on sale, I might pick them up. Of course they are. They're part of my transmog. I just said that, Hunters. Yeah, this is the, I'm sorry, this is the other one. Meter Midair puts it. This is literally something that shows up in the final fight of Deathwing. You probably would miss it if you're not looking at it, but it's there. And it's supposed to represent all of the aspects combining into one. For one moment, all the power of all the aspects was, you know, united, and that's what this thing is, the heart of the aspects. But you only can get this, from the store. Yeah, I bought the Cinder Kitten when it was part of the charity thing. Oh, don't even say that, Jedi. Let's just not even let them hear that start. Anyways, so the price of these things kind of sucks. Like I said, I only get them when they're on sale. But I bring that up because, once again, it's another one of those horrible, horrible situations where the price will not lower because it hasn't already lowered. In other words, it's 25 bucks because people are willing to pay 25 bucks because they're making money off of that. So, yeah. Shrug. Anyways. Moving on. Now that I swear we're going to quest sometime today.